Unrehearsed Creepypasta Narrations, Part 62. The Man Who Brought Happiness. Written by Sam Gallenberger. I found this note on the job. It was titled, The Man Who Brought Happiness. I was at my lowest point. My bruises were fresh. As an only child, I longed for siblings early on. I prayed night in and night out for someone to look out for and protect me. Even someone for me to protect would have helped. That way I could hold on to the fact that these cruel acts at least meant something. At the end of the day, it was never meant to be. So I left. I ran for what seemed like hours, through bush and brush, getting little cuts along the way. Compared to the others, they felt inconsequential. Eventually my legs gave out and I hit the ground. I couldn't help but lay there and wonder, was this all I was meant for? Was this really all there was to life? What would it be like to be happy? Was that even possible? Some bustling could be heard up ahead. You're wondering why I'm not reading. I keep having ads pop up. Crawling nearer, I could see where the woods ended, and across the street was a diner. Grabbing the nearest tree and clinging to it, I pulled myself up one leg, then the other. Moved forward, I told myself. Outside the diner, nobody paid me any mind. They were too busy indulging themselves. Bumping through the crowd, I made my way to the back. My legs were getting wobbly. I needed rest. I laid against the back of the building. I ducked my head into my knees and sobbed. "What are you doing back here, kid?" a man asked. My head raised. I'd never seen anyone like him before. He had long, black sideburns that led to a dark lion's mane, with a little gray at the bottom of his face. He was short and stout, wearing all black except for a tight, white button-up beneath his coat. He had big, bushy eyebrows, and appeared to be missing a few teeth. "What's it to you?" I replied quietly, ducking my head back down. Something was off about the guy. It had me on edge. "You look a little down, is all. I figured I could help you out," he said. "No one can help me. What could this guy do? He didn't know anything about me." "Oh, you don't say. What if I had a little happiness to spare?" My eyes shot up to meet his. "What do you mean, happiness?" I asked. He smiled. "Yes, you see, lad, I make agreements with folks. I give them happiness in exchange for favors. Are you interested?" I wanted to know what the catch was. He explained to me that there were a few conditions to be met. In exchange for this happiness, I would owe him a favor I was bound to oblige. It wouldn't be anything violent or sexual toward me, and it would always be something I was capable of doing. I could return to him for happiness as little or as much as I like. As long as I could find him, he would never turn me away. He would always give me the same amount of happiness, unless I explicitly asked for more. And if I did, it would cost me additional favors. Lastly, I could never tell anyone about our deal. "You've got yourself a deal, sir," I said, extending my hand. He grinned and shook it. Instantly I felt a rush of something I'd never experienced before. It was like my scars had melted away, and my mind had been set free. Is that what it's like to be happy? My reflection showed, and the beaming, bright smile on my face was something I'd never seen before. Life had returned to my eyes. I looked to the man and asked, "What is it I owe you, sir?" He smiled and told me to enjoy myself. So I did. I joined the patrons outside the diner and started chatting them up. We bonded and laughed the night away. Without a doubt, it was the greatest night of my life to that point. I awoke the next morning on a soft patch of grass and still felt great. The road was my oyster. I approached the manager of the diner and asked for a job. I confirmed I was of working age, and we worked out a deal that sent me to a spot a few towns over. I may have been a runaway, but I was a working boy now. The world would be what I made of it. It was a year or so before I could see that man again. I had gone from cook to waiter to assistant manager in no time at all. I'd started seeing someone too. Cassie was everything I could ever dream for in a partner. Big blue eyes, lush blonde hair, and a smile that brightened even the darkest days. She was small, but she had spunk. She had no problem speaking her mind, and I loved that about her. I was becoming something. I was becoming someone. Then the accident happened. I'd been in a rush to work. I wasn't paying attention. Thankfully, the other party was okay. Unfortunately, I tore my labrum. And for those who don't know, shoulder pain is on a completely different level than most injuries. On top of that, recovery would take months. Things hit a low point for me again. The pain was causing me to be irritable at home and at work. It was getting hard to stay optimistic. As if by magic, the man appeared again. He was simply hanging around the diner after one of my shifts. "How you been, lad?" he asked. He looked exactly the same as he had before. "Not so good," I replied. He looked me over. "You looked worse off the last time," he replied, rubbing his dark mane thoroughly. "But if you need some help, I'm always willing." "Help me," I said. "As you wish," he said. Extending his hand, I shook it in a rush of pleasure I felt the first time in return. "Thank you. What do I owe you this time?" I asked, remembering our deal. "How about you meet me at this here spot in 3 months? Then, when we can have a little chat and see how you feel," he said. "You've got yourself a deal, sir. By the way, what's your name?" "You can call me Mr. Moore," he said. "Weird name. Oh well." Thanks to Mr. Moore, my luck had picked up. I had continued shoulder rehab, home mobility. However, the pain was non-existent. Things picked up when Cass and I. We were getting serious now. There was a new restaurant opening, and I was pegged to be the manager of it. Those 3 months flew by. "How have you been, Mr. Moore?" "Things are getting better, I'll tell you that much," he replied. His beard lacked the gray from before. We talked for about an hour. Most of the conversation was about trivial things. I decided it was about time to get home. "Before you get home, you want some on the way out?" he asked. I thought about it. I was already feeling good, but it couldn't hurt, right? Moore's happiness hit different than a normal happy high. I agreed, and we shook hands, and it was the usual rush. But it wasn't the usual rush, but it was still fantastic. "You're not skimping out on me now, are you, Mr. Moore?" "Wouldn't think of it," he replied. "Let's chat again in a month, lad." Deal. The following month didn't go by as quickly as the prior ones had. There were plenty of ups and downs. When I met with Mr. Moore, I suggested we meet weekly going forward. He agreed. This went on for a long time. Each week, we'd meet and chat about life. Every now and then, if something came up, I'd see him another time or two. He didn't have much to say, but somehow I always enthralled talking to him. We had been meeting regularly for years. When I decided to pop the question to Cassie, she said yes. I didn't think I could ever get any happier until I found out we were expected. After I'd celebrated her, I decided to celebrate with Mr. Moore. "I couldn't have done this without you," I said. "You've completely changed my life." "Don't be thanking me for nothing. Every choice you made has been your own. Good on you for making some few good ones." "I'd love for you to come to my wedding, Mr. Moore. I'm sure Cassie would love to meet you." "I'm honored, my boy. I'll see if I can make it happen. Just remember, no one can know about our little deal." I understood. If others got word, he'd never have peace and quiet again. We shook hands and decided we'd be meeting almost daily from now on. Is this whole story a euphemism for drug addiction? I feel like this entire story is a euphemism for somebody having a really bad drug addiction. Cassie and I had a beautiful wedding ceremony, and just as I promised, Mr. Moore was there in the crowd. He had cleaned up nice, even looked like he had all his teeth now. Also, is Mr. Moore some sort of vampire thing? Like on one hand, I feel like the story is a euphemism for like heroin or some shit. On the other hand, I feel like he's a vampire, and he's like, "Yay, you get happiness, but I get your
life energy, I guess. I don't know.
He didn't stay long, and I didn't get to introduce him to Cassie. But it was such a beautiful night, it didn't matter. Shortly after we had our daughter, I almost read that as Macarena. It's called McKenna. I'm drinking some apple cider, by the way, out of a measuring cup. I bought one of those little quart, almost half-gallon things of apple cider with some pumpkin spice in it from Walmart. I'm just pouring it into a giant measuring cup and drinking from that. Years went by and life was good. I probably didn't need them, but now daily meetings kept me at a baseline level of happiness. The highs weren't what they used to be, but that wasn't a big deal. If they didn't do the trick, I'd ask for a double shake. That almost sounds suggestive. It was a good deal for me. Mr. Moore never asked for much, maybe a favor every now and then, but usually just to spend more time with him. I was happy to oblige. Such easy requests allowed me to get a little behind, but not much. At most, I only owe him a handful of favors. It didn't seem like everyone appreciated things were, though. People would casually say things about all the appointments I went on. It seemed like people disliked the fact that I was always happy, as if my frequent appointments somehow impacted them. In reality, they were jealous. I was becoming someone, and it led to my inner circle shrinking. One night, though, things had gotten particularly stressful. An investment had gone bad. Work had been tough. Stresses of being a parent were adding up, etc. Cassie and I fought. Not wanting things to escalate, I stormed out for the night. For days I tried looking for Mr. Moore. To no avail. Each day I felt like my stress levels had reached a new high. I was getting lightheaded and feeling nauseous dailies. Co-workers had noted I was looking kind of gaunt. After 4 days of searching, I was able to find him. He looked like he had de-aged 10 years from the day I met him. Right away I shook his hand and everything felt better. I told him about our fight and how I felt I had been invalidated by Cassie. I really just needed to vent. I feel much better now. I'll see you for our usual meeting tomorrow, I said. Well, hold on there, lad. Cassie put you in this position, right? I want you to slap her good for me. What? That's... fuck. I thought you said the favors wouldn't be violent. A little payback is all. Teach her to respect you. That's not healthy in any regard, man. It's the fuck. He responded. He'd never asked me to do something like this before. I wouldn't dare. I love Cassie. We both said some things we regret, and I'm just as much to blame for the fight as her. I responded. He shook his head at me. I wasn't asking, he said. I refused. That's not a favor. I shot back. We'll see. And with that, he left. I don't think I'd ever been truly afraid of Mr. Moore until that moment. This experience horrified me, and I immediately returned home. I needed to set things right between us. I found her in the kitchen. Hey, babe, I'm so sorry about earlier. Before I could finish, my arm extended and struck her across the face. Her eyes grew wide, and we both sat in silence for a moment. She turned away from me, rubbing her cheek. I couldn't believe it. My arm had acted on its own, as if I was powerless to stop it. Cassie, I swear to God, I did not mean to do that. I would never. There was an accident. Please, Cassie, I love you. She couldn't bring herself to respond. She simply left the room and went upstairs. I sat on the sofa all night, and at one point I looked in the mirror and noticed deep, dark bags under my eyes. My skin looked pale. So many questions floated through my mind. How could I make this right? Would she ever forgive me? How did this happen? What had Mr. Moore done to me? What else could he make me do? I was fearful, but I had to find out. I went searching for Mr. Moore. I couldn't find him right away. Each day, I'd go to our spot and wait. Each day, the guilt of my actions wore on me and I became ill. Finally, after 2 weeks, he returned, and I let him have a piece of my mind. How could you? You forced me to strike my wife, I said, red-faced with fists clenched. You've crossed a line. We're done. He looked me over, raising his arm. He caused me to flinch. He knew I was afraid of him now. Not so, lad. You still owe me, he replied. leaning back and placing his legs on the table in front of him. He looked slimmer than usual. Fine, let's get squared away right now. I don't know what power you hold over me. We were done with this after today. Sorry, lad. We do things on my terms. And after all I've done for you, this is how you repay me? Not a chance. Or what? Or the next person you strike won't be Cassie, he said. His eyes were filled with malice. You wouldn't dare leave my daughter out of this, I shouted. Perhaps we need to settle down a bit. Today ain't the day this all ends. Now get. Before I could protest, my legs started moving on their own. They didn't stop until I got home. When I got home, I was miserable. My body felt like a wreck, my head was killing me, and I constantly felt the urge to vomit. Cassie barely spoke to me, and when she did, it was usually about how thin I'd gotten. Constantly feeling exhausted and on the verge of collapse didn't help my pursuit of forgiveness from Cassie. My efforts weakened and eventually stopped. We basically stopped interacting altogether, other than to put on an act for McKenna. Every aspect of my daily routine had become miserable. I skipped meeting with Moore for the next couple of days. Everything kept getting worse. Having no intimacy with Cassie led me astray, and because of the state I was in, I didn't cover my tracks well. She blew at me when she found out another woman's panties in our bedroom. We could no longer share a room together. My body ached with every movement, and my stomach was in knots when I was still. Depression was setting in, and I was getting desperate. So I met with Mr. Moore again and attempted to shake his hand. He hesitated. I told him he couldn't deny me. Apologize, he said. Like the coward I am, I did. I needed his power. He rubbed his scruff. Now beg me, lad. He snorted, so I did, and then he relented. It didn't make me happy, but it lessened the pain. It gave me the courage to try and sort things out with Cassie one last time. It didn't work, and she left me. She took McKenna. I hated myself with every fiber of my being. I lost my wife. My child had been taken from me. I had no family. I had already pushed my friends away. I read that part. The only thing that kept my misery at bay were the handshakes. Even those didn't work like they used to. Moore would make me beg him to get them too. It was humiliating, and I did as he said, sometimes multiple times in the same sitting. I needed Moore just to get through the day. Now, any missed appointment could be the end of me. He had complete control. Weeks alone turned to months. I missed Cassie and McKenna dearly. This was the lowest I'd ever been in my life. On my birthday, I received a package. It was from Cassie. My eyes lit up. Maybe, just maybe, I hadn't lost everything. It was divorce papers. That was the final straw for me. Regardless of my fears or what he could do to me, Mr. Moore needed to pay. I took a long look at myself in the mirror that night. I could barely recognize myself. The man staring back at me was disheveled and looked starved. The pale complexion was ghost-like, and my tired eyes looked as if they had forgotten what sleep was. This needed to change, and I set out to meet Mr. Moore the next day. There he was at our usual spot, feet up on the table, grinning, as if life was easy. It was infuriating. You took everything from me, I screamed. He shook his head. No, boy. Everything you ever wanted was right in front of you. You had real happiness. The whole time you could walk away at any point, yet you chose to keep coming back to me. I didn't take nothing. You gave it all away willingly. No, that's not true! I was imagining the Luke Skywalker thing in Darth, like when he's like, in the Luke and Star Wars, like, that's not true! Okay. You manipulated me. Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. Doesn't matter now. Every time we shook hands, you gave me more of yourself. Each time I grew stronger and gained more power over you. If you had stopped early on, things could have been different. But now I'm in complete control. There's nothing left of you. I'll expose you. I'll tell everyone about our deal. No, lad. You won't. That was part of the agreement. You violated it, and you'll wish you wouldn't have. I have nothing left to lose. Don't you? He replied. No. Tonight is the night I expose you to everyone. You'll never ruin another life ever again. Then I have a feeling you won't be seeing tomorrow, lad. But do what you must, he scoffed. I stormed away. When I returned home, I knew I had to act. His threat would be legitimate, and I feared this truly would be the last day of my life. He doesn't bluff. A contingency was needed. Before I called Cassie to explain everything, I started writing. I had responded. Oh, we're a different person now. Okay, so we're now a 911 operator. Okay, that's what all the ellipses, which are spelled with stars instead of dots, is telling me. It said that this thing was going to take 11 minutes to read. I'm not a slow reader. Okay, we're almost at the end. I had responded to a 911 call. Why did you say it that way? I had responded to a 911 call. It's probably just the date. It's like, wow, I'm easily confused. I had responded to a 911 call regarding a neighbor who hadn't been seen for a couple of days. A man in his early 30s, that the neighbors told me had lost his way. I found this note on the chair beneath his dangling body. As I was leaving, I could have sworn I saw a man with a dark lion's mane watching off in the distance. Interesting story. I really do feel like it's an allegory for drugs. Okay. Neat. Bye, everybody.